Hi everyone, I'm Andrea Galately and this is Mike Galately from Team Witch Doctor on the TV show BattleBox. If you're watching live today, we're going to discuss our match versus Endgame. And you're probably already supporting us on Patreon or Facebook to have access to this live stream. So thank you so much for that. It really makes a huge difference to our team. If you're watching a recording and you want to be able to join live for the next one so you can interact with us in real time and ask some questions, then take a look at the description below so you can get some information on how to join. So with that, let's get started on talking about our main event fight versus Endgame. So before we go to questions, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what went right and what went wrong during that fight. I think it was really neck and neck for the first minute or so of the fight, and then it kind of looks like we lose drive on one side, and then there's a big hit and that front wedge comes off, and then it looks like we regain drive, even though obviously by that point we've lost control of the match and it's impossible to recover when you're down for any amount of time with Endgame. So what happened there was that we actually, Pete talks about this at the beginning of the fight, we actually made Witch Doctor longer this year. And in order to make up the extra weight, we changed from our AR500 steel front armor to titanium this year. And during one of those big hits with Endgame, the titanium wheel guard essentially bent into the wheel and jammed up that side of the drive. You see it there, and Mike has this great opportunity to go in, and the robot just kind of turns almost in place, almost like it's crab walking. And the next big hit, Endgame shoots that part off, which frees our drive, and our drive is still functional, so it's able to move for the rest of the match. So obviously it's frustrating to find an issue like that during a main event fight with the previous champ, but some things you just can't test outside the battle box. I mean, if you've ever held one of these BattleBot parts in person, you'll see that they are huge and heavy and super stiff, and it's hard to imagine them ever bending or breaking. But when you test things in the battle box, the story is a little bit different. So let's see, if you have any questions about the fight, go ahead and post them in the chat. And I will show some photos. So this is a pre-fight photo. We're waiting outside in Las Vegas next to Endgame. So this is kind of the first time that we could put both robots side by side and kind of see how they square up size-wise. So it turns out that even though Endgame's a lot shorter than us, the width of the robots are actually pretty similar. And we got to chat, with Endgame out there before the fight. So that's always fun, and Endgame's a great team. And then here's, one of I think the best photos from this match, which is a huge weapon-to-weapon hit showing a shower of sparks. And both robots use titanium parts, so you'll notice some of the sparks are white, which is also really fun to see. And then in this photo here, this is a hit I was talking about. You can see on the lower right-hand corner that front wedge is actually flying off in this photo. So Dan was able to take this just as that hit was happening. And if you look at the front of Witch Doctor, that purple square on the front by the front wheel is where that green wedge would normally be attached to. So you can see he went through the wedge and actually damaged the purple aluminum frame as well. And at that point, it freed up that wheel so we could drive, but obviously it wasn't enough to be able to regain control there, especially since we ended up in that corner that's created right next to the upper shelf. So that's a bad place to be, especially with somebody like Endgame. We were obviously concerned about the forks on Endgame, and we were pleasantly, I wouldn't say surprised, but it was nice to see that we could do some damage to them and that he wasn't able to get under us as reliably as I think he hoped. And I really like this photo because you can see one of his forks just directly in the path of our weapon disc, and you see a bunch of white sparks coming off of it. So we were really happy to see that our weapon could damage those forks, especially because we went into this match without any ground game of our own. So obviously that puts a lot of pressure on Mike because he's got to really outdrive Endgame in order to be able to win this fight, which I think he did a great job of until the robot stopped driving as well as it could. So Keith says, that was a great fight, didn't know about the white sparks. Yeah, that's something that's really cool. By seeing the color of the sparks, you can actually tell what material the parts are. So when you see yellow, orange sparks, it's usually off of steel. And when you see white sparks, it's usually from titanium parts. So if you look at future matches, now that you know that we're going to change back to steel wedges, we actually called our sponsor and had to make emergency steel wedges, so we didn't have to use the titanium ones anymore. That was Kalamazoo Waterjet. You should notice in fights going forward that the sparks when somebody hits our front armor should be bright yellow or orange instead of the white that we see here. Ashley says the weapon motor held up much better than versus Duck. What happened in that other match that didn't happen versus Endgame? Do you want to answer this one?
Specifically to the motors?
Yeah, the weapon motors.
So in the Duck fight, so we have this recurring issue with our speed controllers, actually, that we haven't quite figured out at this point. So in the Duck fight, basically we have two motors and one speed controller per motor. So when you power the robot on, the motors were going into this like bootloader mode that we've never seen before, and it was an intermittent problem, so it wouldn't even happen every time. So after the Duck fight, we realized that we were only on one weapon motor the entire fight. So we took the robot out and kind of assessed what happened, and when we powered the robot on, well, towards the end of the fight, Andrea, consciously sees the weapon struggling, so she throttles down and just leaves the weapon off, essentially. So we didn't, catch anything on fire or go up in smoke or whatever. That would look way worse for the judges, I think. So at the end of the fight, anyway, we power the robot up in the pit area, and we see that one of the controllers is in this bootloader mode. So we think it's like a fluke, and we power the robot on a bunch of times, and we can't get it to do it again. So to repeat that issue. So we just chalk it up to some weird coincidence, and we go into the endgame fight, and with testing the robot a bunch of times, and we still couldn't get this issue to reoccur. So we go into the endgame fight, and everything's working great at the beginning of the match, and at the very end of the match, you see that I lose drive, or the drive kind of dies at the end, and the self-rider dies. The self-rider died because they broke the chain. So the motor worked fine, but the self-rider obviously wasn't mechanically connected to the motor anymore. But the drive seemed to have suffer from this issue with the transmitter controllers going into this like bootloader mode, just from the shock of getting hit by Endgame at the end of that fight. And so basically there's a button on the controller that you depress while you power it on to go into this mode. And apparently that it like just sent it into this bootloader mode. So super weird thing that now we figured out what causes it, and we work to resolve that for the next fight.
So, but to her point, the whole Duck fight we had on only one weapon motor, and for this match we had both weapon motors working the whole time, so we were seeing the full power of our new weapon system. So we were really glad to see that worked well. But like Mike said, we had to figure out this intermittent issue with the controllers going forward. One of our teammates, Rick, really is, our guru in terms of electronics, and he was able to diagnose that, because it's, I love all things mechanical. Electrical is like wizardry to me, and not the good voodoo kind, because these intermittent problems are so hard to chase down, and you see so many robots, especially at the beginning while they're having the first few matches, try to chase down problems like this. I know we've heard Hal and Duck talk about how their drive worked perfectly at home in testing. They've had Duck built for over a year, and then they get into the BattleBox and they're having issues with their drive they weren't seeing before. So it's just, BattleBox is just a different use scenario that's so hard for us to test ahead of time. Keith asks, I know weight is an issue, but do any of the builders include data loggers to diagnose issues like this? So our controllers don't have, they can't store the data logging internally. We would have to have a separate part to do that. I know a lot of other controllers do. We actually borrowed a little device that Victor from Rotator had built that allows data logging from some of the other controllers that we were trying. So we do data log during the off season to see how things are working and stuff, but we haven't implemented it in the robot. Honestly, it's not even from a weight perspective, because they don't weigh that much. It's just from the risk of having another thing that's talking to your controller while the match is happening. And we'd rather not have that little extra bit of information and not risk the data logger doing anything to have us lose the match, because the risk is just too high and you never know what's going to, take something out. So I'd say it's more from a risk issue.
Yeah, there are a couple teams that use live telemetry. Like Ribot uses some wacky live telemetry. They have like all custom controllers anyway, so they have a display on their transmitter that displays like voltage and whatever, and I don't know, all kinds of
it's pretty cool
stuff. It's cool, but there's so much going on in a fight. You can't really. You'd have to have another person like monitoring it. Really, I definitely don't have the mental brainwidth to check that during a fight. With everything that's going on. So if anything, it'd be like someone would yell over your shoulder, "Hey, the whatever current's too high on motor 2." I mean, it wouldn't really mean anything. I don't think that I'd even change how I'm driving, because you got to really leave it all out there. And if it costs you a match because a motor dies, whatever, but saving it for the next fight, if it costs you the loss, then
right,
it doesn't really help much.
Well, because you talked about having limited bandwidth, because it and I've heard other BattleBox drivers talk about this, but it takes so much bandwidth while you're there that most of the time we don't even remember the fight after it happened. Like, people have to tell us what happened. I know Alex Hattori has said that he didn't even register the explosion in one of his fights because he was like so into what's next. You can't record any memories, just move on to what's next. So when he's driving, I'm doing weapon, we actually have our teammate Paul, who's been on Witch Doctor since the team started, and he's behind us, and he knows his voice is the only voice we hear. Maybe the ref if he yells the same thing a few times, but he knows to say that's not our hammer, or that's our hammer, or 30 seconds left, and he just says like exactly the information we need to know to kind of keep going. But it's just hard to describe how intense it is during the fights. Carl asks, are you seeing any issues being caused by the hot and dry environment, or from going to the builder's tent to the BattleBox? Yeah, so when we went to Vegas, we talked a little bit about it in the first live stream. There was a huge issue with static and getting shocked. So we had to actually ground our whole cart to try to not shock our electronics.
Anybody working on the robot, I think we all had ESD bracelets that connected to the cart or to the robot. We had like grounding straps on our shoes, that we had aluminum tape all over the pit floor, which a lot of teams wound up doing as well. I don't think I heard of anybody actually blowing up electronics just from touching inside the robot, but I think a lot of people were definitely being careful. So that might have been, a reason that it got avoided, but we didn't have any issues specifically that I know of.
Yeah, nothing we could attribute specifically to that, but I will tell you it hurt a lot. I had never gotten shocked like that. It really was shocking. And it usually happened when you touch the metal table or something. So we had, like Mike said, those straps on our shoes, so it would transfer the shock to your ankle when you walked outside the building, which was really not a comfortable sensation. But the aluminum tape helped us discharge more often, so it made it a little bit less intense. Otherwise, it did kind of rain one day, which nobody was really expecting. You don't even remember. It was like sprinkling outside, and I had to go over to production because it started like right before we were about to walk out to the arena, and I was like, oh, we're not taking the robot out there if it's raining. So they gave us like all this plastic tarp to cover the robot in. It was a light rain. It wasn't like a Florida rain. It was a desert rain, I guess. But I think it was something everybody was kind of shocked by. We were very prepared for heat, but not so much for rain. The heat was so much of a concern that they actually air conditioned the test boxes, because that's like an oven. They would get so hot that probably melt the paint off the floor. So that was air conditioned. We had an air conditioned battery tent, which in the past the battery tent has just been outside. And they would call us like with the match before ours, so that we would walk over and then wait inside backstage by the arena. So the robots were really only ever outside in the time that it took to move from one place to the other, but we never had to wait outside because everybody was concerned about these robots getting heated up before they went into the BattleBox. That's really the opposite of what we want. So Glitter Bomb is asking, what is the grip like on the arena floor, and what tire materials are working well? So Glitter Bomb, I know you guys are robot builders and hoping to come to BattleBots, so I'm sure you're asking this question in more ways than one. I don't think the arena floor material has really changed in a while. It's black paint with like this, I guess it's like do they put sand in it? It's like a grippy compound.
I don't know if it's sand or it's not, maybe it's a rubberized, something like that, but
yeah,
I think it's a little less ghetto than sand in the paint, like some other events do. But yeah.
We're using a pretty firm urethane compared to other people, and ours seems to get all the grip we want without wearing our wheels down, too much during the fight. The Brazilian wheels, which you've seen on obviously the Brazilian robots and on Whiplash and Defender and Duck, those are vulcanized rubber, and they seem to have some of the best grip out there. We're not traditionally a pushing robot, so having more grip is obviously harder on your drive motors and stuff. So, I think we have a good balance where we're at, but those really grippy Brazilian wheels seem to be a kind of a trend.
I think a lot more people are using the go-kart tires, like obviously Hypershock and Uppercut.
Yeah.
And Sawblaze. That's an alternative, but kind of provides a similar grip probably to the Brazilian wheels.
I guess those would also be vulcanized, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the go-kart.
Yeah.
Keith says probably not a lot of static in Florida as opposed to dry Nevada. Yeah, we actually had an issue with our fire system. We don't have a fire system now, but when we went to Las Vegas to compete on the Amazon Remars event, we did have the fire system in the robot. And we really had to tweak the settings when we got to Las Vegas because it wouldn't ignite the same way that it did back in Florida. And I know that year Ice Wave had pretty serious issues tuning his engine on Ice Wave because of, I don't know, the change in elevation or the humidity, for combustion. That's all really important. So we definitely have to test our robots in the new environment. And then when you go in the BattleBox, that's an environment that doesn't have any moving air, and it's, that's its own beast. So not something we can tune for there, but you gotta have to try it in the real deal. Do you have enough time to scope out other teams? Who did you fear most this season? Question from Ashley. I think I say this on about like every interview, but as soon, I was super optimistic going into the season, and then you get there and you look around and you're like, wow, everybody, these are not the same robots from last season. Like everybody upped their game so much that you kind of like tune your expectations because it's not like, how do I match up against Endgame? It's how do I match up against Hypershock and Whiplash and Lockjaw, and there's so many matchups where the robots are just, I would say, even to ours, and it's just so hard to guess which way a match is going to go. Do you have a robot that you feared the most this season?
Well, I mean, to kind of echo your point, like I think the first few days when everyone's going through safety and stuff, there's like a rumblings in the pit area of like, oh, Glitch is going to go do safety. So everybody kind of makes their way out to the test box so they can see, these new robots test and see how reliable, they are, how they drive, obviously how their weapon sounds and how it looks. And same goes for obviously all the OG robots, like, Minotaur makes a ton of noise, Copperhead is loud. So anybody wants to go out there and just kind of scope all the competition. And I think it's kind of a big family. A lot of people are friendly. So it's a good opportunity to go kind of see your friends and chat for the first time usually, because a lot of people like get there and unpack and then you get your robot ready because of course you're already being rushed by production. So like, getting through the first couple days and getting the robot ready, fight ready, it's a big push, and not everybody gets there the first day even. So some people come in a few days late, and so they're even under more stress. But just kind of recap that, everybody's scoping everybody out, no matter what they say. But yeah, of course, like you want to see the new robots. BattleBots obviously starts announcing the teams kind of late, before the season, but not super early. So when you see new robot, like obviously everybody kind of has eyes on robots like Riptide, Glitch, these new beater type robots, just to kind of see what what people are showing up with. And obviously a lot of these builders are new BattleBox builders, but they've been in robotics for a long time, whether it's Vex or with smaller robots. So, kind of seeing the new talent coming in and seeing what people are showing up with. So, yeah, I mean, scoping out the newbies and obviously seeing like Minotaur and Hydra, obviously, and Endgame. Those, obviously, everybody wants to see Sawblaze. He made, such big improvements last year to his robot, and obviously he keeps tweaking and keeps iterating, and he's looking really good, obviously, this season. So, everyone kind of wants to see the top stuff, and I think everyone, you go to wander over to someone's pit and you like make small talk, but you're checking out the robot too. And I think, like I said, people are friendly enough they see your side eyeing them and they're like, hey, what you want to see these new forks I got? And most people don't show you the forks, but they'll show you everything else. Ground game is so important this year. So
yeah, I mean, we're fans of the sport too, so we're obviously competing and try to be competitive, but it's also super cool to see what people bring. And you start hearing rumblings about the new robots and who's, Glitch is hitting really hard this year, or Riptide's hitting really hard this year. But in terms of robots we feared, let's say from previous seasons, obviously Sawblaze took us out last year. And even though we did build forks for Witch Doctor this year, which we may or may not use, you heard me try to trash talk.
We've kept them secret, like up until at least it's through our second fight, even like nobody's seen him. Yeah. We've had him in the, in like a crate, but
it's hard to counter the forks on Sawblaze, and Sawblaze hits really, really, really hard. And I'm really excited to fear a robot that's as original as Sawblaze, because he's really built something that's super, super effective. It's still super hard to counter. The combination of the forks and the top armor, I don't know how much top armor you need to have to stop that saw from going through, but I don't think any robot in the sport has enough. And I thought we'd also at some point get a rematch with Hydra. I thought it was going to be our first fight was going to be Hydra. And obviously he's super, super low, so I think we would have brought our forks out for that if that was our first match. So yeah, I think it's just some of the big dogs from the previous season for sure. Ashley asks, how much did supply issues impact Witch Doctor? That's an interesting question. So we use Vex BB controllers, and we had ordered them months and months and months ahead of time, and they were back ordered. And they asked if we wanted to cancel the order. I was like, just leave the order in case they ever come back into stock. And we actually were working on changing Witch Doctor to brushless for this year. So we were buying brushless speed controllers and doing a bunch of testing with that. We've posted some YouTube videos about that, but at the last minute we decided not to do that, to go brushless, because we just had some bugs we didn't feel comfortable with, taking that risk for this season. And then those controllers finally showed up like over 6 months after I had ordered them. And at the same time, Mag Motor agreed to sponsor us. So it was kind of like the stars aligned, like here's controllers and motors, and it was just meant to keep the brushed weapon system this year. But had we not had that, those controllers come in, I think you would have seen a brushless Witch Doctor this year out of necessity because of the supply chain issues. Keith asks, it seems like the teams actually have a lot of camaraderie in the pits. Is that real? It is definitely real. I hope that never changes. I love that part of the sport. I know the sport's getting more and more competitive, and there's more and more on the line, so it's hard to keep that. But I'd say, at least until now, all the teams have definitely been helping each other and happy to see each other. And I think there's been a lot of camaraderie in the BattleBox. I've seen opponents unstick other robots more than I have any other season. Because as a competitor, you're watching these matches and you think, like, would I have done that? Would I do what Defender did and unstick a perfectly functional Riptide and risk that? But, first of all, it's great camaraderie and it's great for the sport. And, it's also good to show the selection committee that you're not afraid to keep the match going and that you're willing to make good TV. So, but I definitely think it's noteworthy, the camaraderie in the arena so far. Ashley says, one of my favorite parts in the 2021 season was the pit interviews. Yeah, Jenny couldn't come back this year because she had another job already scheduled. I think it's really unfortunate. I love those pit segments. I think it works really well with Jenny because she's genuinely excited about the sport, and when she's asking a question, it's not just because she has to. She really genuinely wants to know the answer. She's interested, so I think she brings a really great perspective. I hope we can get her back next year. Adam asks, which rookie has impressed you the most so far? What do you think?
Good question. Well, we just saw Riptide's fight, and I think that was, I mean, they didn't really get great hits on Defender per se, but I mean, when they self-righted themselves against the wall, and they launched themselves like 15 feet in the air, I mean, that's just a show of how much energy they have in their weapon, and obviously they're hitting like an immobile object like the arena, so you can really get a ton of energy transfer. But I mean, their robot, that weapon's pretty scary, so we'll have to kind of see how they proceed. I don't remember some of their fights, but whether we're working on the robot or we're trying to take some time to relax or whatever, we don't get to watch all the fights despite us being there for 2 weeks straight. So there's definitely some fights I'm like, oh, did they actually what? I don't remember that. So watching the episodes now is still exciting and new for us. Like I didn't get to see the Rotator Black Dragon fight at the event, and I didn't see the Hypershock Lockjaw fight either. So those are two of our friends. Both of them are in Miami, so we actually share a shop with Hypershock, and so to see the robot working really well is super exciting for them. Obviously for us also to kind of see it all come together for Will. So that's been great. But and he was actually he's 2 pits down from us, which we usually never get to pit near Hypershock for whatever reason. I don't know how they figure out the pit layout, but this year we were 2 pits down from Hypershock, and Rotator was just on the other side of us. So I would have been nice to congratulate them on their wins, but
we were working diligently after a fight with Endgame because we had a lot of damage to fix, and we look up from the robot and we see Will floating by and a giant inflatable flamingo. We're like, okay, that's just regular Hypershock things. So obviously in between all the hard work that we have to do, it's really fun to be near friends and people as silly as Hypershock. Going back to the newbie bots, I was really impressed with Blip because not only are they're a veteran team, obviously, but it's a rookie robot with a whole new innovative flipper mechanism that's never been done before. It's something totally dreamt up by Aaron and the team. So to see them flipping well has been really, really cool.
Yeah, if you guys haven't, I think Seems Reasonable is the Tantrum parent team name. They've been releasing some videos about how Blip works because they don't really explain it very well on the show. So if you don't know already, definitely check those videos out because it really is an amazing piece of engineering. And Aaron has been definitely working on it for I think over a year. He had started with a small scale model of his concept for this flipping mechanism, which he showed us at BattleBox last year. This little tiny version of it like this. And, oh, do you think it would work if I twist this bundle of rope? And we're like, that's not going to scale up to 250 pounds. You're crazy, man. But, he worked so diligently on the off season, getting that thing right, and tons of math and engineering, crazy stuff. So
Aaron's creations are pretty awesome.
Yeah. Aaron's definitely the next level for sure. But yeah, check it out. It's amazing, and he's still, that was what he has only fought once, I think, right? So far.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So, he's still working bugs out. He's still dialing it in, and obviously, growing pains and stuff that everybody has with a first year robot. So, it only gets better from here.
Carl asks, in the other fights so far, have you been surprised by any of the results that give you concern in case you fight one of the robots that surprised you? Yeah, we're, like Mike said, we're looking really closely at the rookie teams because it can be dangerous to fight someone that you have no idea how to fight. We do a lot of homework before every fight. We watch every single match that they've ever had and every video they've ever posted anywhere. And you can't study like that for new robots. I think, we've mentioned Glitch and Riptide because they have really destructive weapons. Riptide is such a large percentage of his front is weapon. If you try to use forks, you're going to be sticking them right in his weapon. So not underestimating robots is a good theme to have, and I think that the newbie bots definitely fall into that.
Not only just watching robots, but also watching matches to see how the judges judge certain fights. It's not always clear, and we don't always agree with the judges' calls either. So it's interesting to watch fights that you think, and obviously we all watch the fights and go, oh well, obviously so and so won this, but it's really interesting to see the judges' decisions at the end of it and kind of think about it from their perspective. We would say, oh well, obviously Hijinks gets all the damage points or whatever, and then you go, well, maybe if they broke themselves, they're on Kraken or whatever. There's a lot of nuances with it. It's not always black and white. And, especially with those fights that are like split 6-5 or whatever, 1 point obviously could make the difference the way the judges go. So we watch a lot of those fights, especially when it's, a vertical spinner against somebody else, because we obviously need to see how the judges react to that. And if, the robot breaks itself or whatever. And that's, like Ashley says, Hal Rucker announced that Duck is being retired based on the scoring system, and that's exactly kind of what I'm talking about. The Duck's whole mantra is "break your fist on my face," and that used to work, but they changed the scoring system and they kind of tweak it every year, and it definitely is not working in his favor this year. Obviously, he hasn't been able to really capitalize, I think, with his driving as much as he normally does, but he disabled our weapon in our fight. But he did. I mean, yeah. From the judge's perspective, he definitely disabled our weapon. I'm not poking fun or whatever, but
in that match, I chose to kind of stop trying to make the weapon work when I realized that there was something wrong, so that it wouldn't smoke, and that would give even more points to Duck and to Hal. So we're definitely very aware of what the judges are seeing. We heard Shatter say that they don't have the pieces of the robot that shatter off on purpose in some of their matches because they just can't risk it looking like more damage, even if subconsciously. So I'd say the scoring definitely impacts how the robots fight.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley asked, how hard is it to keep the NDA? We're old pros at it by now. We've had a lot of practice. This is our 6th season on the show. It's hard, especially when you're excited about a particular fight. I know Hypershock was super excited about his Lockjaw fight, and he's had to kind of keep it under wraps for a long time because he was so excited to have fought Donald and Lockjaw and to have won that fight so decisively. So yeah, it's hard. I would go into work and I had this one coworker that was always like, so how much money do you win if you win? And kind of, if I told him the answer quickly, obviously I had won. And if I didn't know, then I didn't win. So a lot of people try to trap us and try to figure it out. When we run the classes for kids, they're looking everywhere around the shop to see if we have a giant nut hidden somewhere. And they analyze the robot when we show it. At the South Florida Fair, we just exhibited the robot, and they're like, well, there's a little bit of orange over here. That could be like this robot, or this robot, so it's kind of fun to play the game and kind of relive the experience through our social media posts and stuff while it's happening.
I think the most dangerous thing for me is remembering who fought when and, which fights we actually have seen or not. So it's kind of like, and sometimes they'll film the fights in a certain order and then they air them out of order. So, when you're talking to someone about the next episode or whatever, or the last episode, you have to remember well, this fight actually happened before that other fight, and you don't remember. People try to trick you too, so you gotta be very careful.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't want to know. They want to know, but they don't want to know because it's just fun to be surprised when you watch the show, and kind of, it's like knowing the ending of a good movie. So so let me shift a little bit to showing you some of the damage photos from that fight. So I have this photo because it's proof that we got at least one hit on endgame. I think we got a couple hits on endgame, but obviously, especially with all the ground game that endgame has, it's exciting to know that we could still get under him and still get a good hit without it. So any picture where you could have the previous year's champ in the air is a keeper for sure. So let's look at what Witch Doctor looked at after that exchange. So this is a view from the back of Witch Doctor. The green part is our rear armor. So you can see it has a very nice endgame shaped gash right at the bottom. So he got very good purchase there. That was one of the big hits towards the end where you see us get some really, really good airtime. You can see he hit the wheel back there, and that axle actually bent a little bit and enough to disengage that chain. So that chain you see hanging down is not broken, it's just popped off. So let me show you that same view from the top. So here you can actually see the cart through. You see the aluminum part that's all deformed, then you see the cart because he actually went through our base plate. You can see that the rear rail is bent enough that corner doesn't match up anymore. That happened on both sides from how hard the hits were. Obviously, we were excited the middle bolts held on and the rail didn't come off because that would have looked a lot worse. From experience, we've learned to leave some air gap between armor and important parts. So we actually have this big triangle in the back where we don't have anything, not motors or electronics or anything. So that didn't really save us because we had lost the match anyway. But during that hit, we didn't actually damage any electronics or motors. So the air gap definitely came in handy there.
Yeah, so another thing is like Andre mentioned the titanium armor. Obviously, like the front armor is 1/4-inch titanium, and we also made the rear 1/4-inch titanium here. So this is all super bent out, but the hardware that holds this purple piece and this purple piece together is all sheared off, and this is bent out about, I'd say 3/4 of an inch maybe from this face to the green part. So, that's a lot of force required to bend titanium that far. And obviously, like, he hit it through the bottom of the robot and then pulled out on this. So, ton of energy transferred there. It's kind of ridiculous when you think about, how much armor is even needed really to withstand these hits. It's not even about like withstanding the hits anymore. It's like you have to just assume stuff is going to get bent or broken, and the robot has to just keep on working.
So we talked a lot about weapon discs, obviously, prior to the season because of the issues we had last season. We posted a video on that whole journey that we took in between seasons, if you haven't seen it. So this year, our weapon discs are AR500, which is a material that's been a good alternative to us compared to the S7 tool seal we've been using before. So here you can see, what you're seeing here is actually a really close-up of the weapon tooth. So this used to be square, and now it's missing a whole corner. So it's definitely getting wear, and they're almost disposable at this time. At this point, we made a lot of weapon discs because we knew this. But this was, worst case scenario, pretty much like going weapon to weapon with Endgame, who's, probably the most powerful vertical spinner out there right now. So that this didn't crack or bend or break, and it was still usable for the rest of that fight. So, I think that's about as good as we can hope. And then we talked about the front wedge that got hit off, jamming into the wheel. So here you can see that front wheel that got hit by that wedge and what that damage looked like. So you can see there was a whole lot of force there. But once the wedge got ripped off, this was still round enough to drive, probably a little bouncy in the front, but definitely still making contact with the ground. So if Endgame had given us, a little breathing room and not hit us back to back like he did, Witch Doctor was drivable and could have kept driving and fighting. Obviously, I don't blame him for that. We would have done the same thing. And in a match with somebody like Endgame, you know, as soon as there's any hesitation and there's a turning point in control like that, it's really, really hard to turn it back the other way. And then this is proof that we did do something to Endgame, and we did put our mark on Endgame. So this is one of the weapon rails that supports his weapon. That's the blue part that you see there. So we did manage to place a hit pretty high up on him, actually. So not that this would have changed the results, but it's always kind of fun to see your mark on other robots, and especially the previous year's champ. So Adam says, yeah, the Hydra's out of the arena was actually after Hypershock's out of the arena. That's something I didn't realize because we fought last episode and Hypershock fought this episode. So in real time when we're filming, those probably both happened the same day. So we usually don't see other fights live that happened the same time as ours, but go ahead.
What?
But I was gonna say that really explains Will's reaction, because when he gets him out of the arena, Will's face is just like he was a bad boy.
Yeah, because they threatened us that anybody because they made some changes to the arena to try to eliminate out of the arena. So they added this like sneeze guard, they call it, like all the way around the back and sides of the arena, so that robots get thrown up, they don't go behind the wall. And that's obviously, they want to keep the matches going, but also there's some safety concerns there as well. If a robot's on fire and it gets thrown behind there while it's on or whatever, leaning up against the arena wall, not good for anybody. And also all the power and lighting and stuff, all the wiring runs in that kind of dead space back there. So if a robot gets back there, it could do a ton of damage to all the production equipment, which is probably more expensive than the whole arena itself. So there's a lot of reasons to get rid of that out of the arena area, but the one place they couldn't do it was by the doors. So because the doors have that wall that swings in when they open the doors. So they gave us a long talking to, saying like, you can't out of the arena anybody by the doors, and if you do it purposefully, you'll be immediately disqualified. And so when Will did that, he thought, I'm sure the worst of it, that he was going to get disqualified for taking that shot, because we have a builders meeting at the beginning of filming, and everybody's asking a million questions about what if this, what if that, and that's one of the things that they brought up. So there was some argument, and they said, well, it has to be intentional. If you hit a robot and it bounces off the wall and goes into that area, it's fine. But if you intentionally line up a shot and hit the robot out, then you're going to get disqualified. And obviously, Lockjaw was sitting there with his butt plow facing Hypershock, and Will went for the shot and punted him right out perfectly.
How do you give up that shot, though?
I would take the shot too, honestly. But I'm sure he was ecstatic that he won, or flipped Lockjaw out, but at the same time, terrified. I'm sure terrified that he was going to get disqualified. So that was his very genuine reaction. He wasn't afraid for Lockjaw or whatever. I mean, he was really concerned that he was going to get disqualified.
Yeah, Carl is saying that most of the spectators around him at the taping thought Hypershock would be disqualified for the out of the box. Yeah, I think this rule ended up turning into if the robot is dead and on fire, don't go flip it out into the doors. It has to be really deliberate, you're just trying to be a problem. Yeah, and we talked about it too before the match, how worried are we about this rule? Are we really gonna, risk losing the match by not taking a winning shot near the corners? So I'm glad they backed off a little bit on that. I hope if, they still have that concern next year, that they solve it some other way other than just telling us to try really, really hard not to do it, because BattleBots is pretty chaotic. And yeah, Keith says he'd like to go someday. Yeah, going to BattleBots, I've said this before, but I've been going to BattleBots since I was 14 years old. I mean, the robots then weighed 120 pounds. We weren't doing the heavyweights, but every time I see it, see the first match live of the season, it's like you're seeing it for the first time, because it's so crazy to see it in person. And I know Carl went 14 sessions, I think, this year, and I hope he was as excited for the last one as the first one, because it's just unbelievable to see these things live. Ashley asked how much of your life and time is dedicated to BattleBots and Witch Doctor. A lot. A lot of people don't know that, you know, we build the robot, but we also, all the YouTube videos we make and running our team store and everything we do is all us. Like there's nobody else. It's just us doing everything. You know, people are surprised when I reply to a order question on our store and it's actually me replying. It's like, yeah, it's us doing everything. Like we don't have anybody else. But you know, obviously it's a huge part of our lives in a good way, something we're really proud to do. And, it's just been a lot of fun doing the show. I'm happy to ride it as long as it lasts. I'm very aware that we're not going to have a TV show forever. I hope we do. But you know, all good things come to an end. So I'm doing everything I can while we have it.
Ashley asked a question before if I practice driving in the off season, and the answer is no. Not as much as we'd hope. So like every year we've rebuilt the robot and changed it enough to affect, you know, it drives mostly the same. It's the same motors we've been using for a few years in a row now. So like most of the dynamics of how the robot drives are pretty similar. But this year we did make the robot about 3 inches longer to try to fit the weapon motors down inside. So that normally we finish building the robot like right before we ship it, maybe a week, or I don't know, not even a week before.
On a good year, yeah.
Yeah. So we get the robot together. Usually we drive it around a bit just to kind of make sure everything's working. You know, that we haven't. Obviously, we try to assemble the full robot before we ship. We have at least one fully assembled before we ship, so we can check, you know, obviously the chain assemblies and everything, and make sure there's no misalignment or anything weird. Obviously, we do all these dry fitting and everything kind of as soon as we start getting parts, we start checking parts, but to avoid any issues later. But this year we finished the robot like 2 weeks early, I think.
We did pretty good.
Yeah, so we actually, for the first time ever, we built this like 250-pound test load, which I don't know, you probably talked about it.
Well, we posted a whole video about the testing.
Oh, yeah.
With
baby tantrum. So we actually were able to hit something for the first time ever before sending the robot off to BattleBox. So that was actually really cool, because normally when we drive the robot, we don't always even have the weapon on it. It's just whatever we have that's drivable, because we don't want to mess up the robot either. Like, you know, got to have the paint looking good and stuff for the team photos. So this year we actually put the whole thing together, spun up the weapon and hit something, and you know, I was able to spend a bit of time driving it around. But you know, definitely not as much time as I'd like to spend, and definitely not as much time as I think this like sport deserves. Like we really should, you know, put the time into it. But every year we change it enough that it's like we really need to drive the next one, not this one. Yeah, the old one.
We actually built 2 Witch Doctors this year, so the one that we used for the limited testing we did is not the ones that we took the photos with, because it wasn't, you know, as perfect as the other one.
Yeah, it's all natural driving skill, like Ashley said. I have to keep my legendary driver status. It's just all natural. I don't even practice. I just go in there and YOLO.
So it sounds like, Dan, from your comment, you've also been able to go and do the VIP tour. That's awesome. Definitely let us know next season. Keith, let us know if you decide to go in person. I know we saw Carl there a few times, which is always awesome to see a friendly face. Carl made all these Witch Doctor cutouts for us, so it was easy to identify him when he was holding one of those up in the audience. So it's always so nice to walk through the tunnel and look out into the audience and see, you know, people excited that you're there and that you're fighting and rooting for you. So that's really a lot of fun.
Yeah, unfortunately this year with the VIP tour, you know, because of COVID restrictions and stuff, they had to be like, they let them come into the pit area, but just kind of skirt around the outside. They weren't able to come through the pits. So, and everybody had to wear masks and everything like that. Yeah. So if like you were there and we didn't recognize you or something, like we're sorry. But, you know, with everybody's faces covered up, it's really hard to you know, identify your eyebrows. So,
yeah. That's a good point, because I definitely met some people that were like, oh, you know, they had to tell me who they were, and it's like, oh yeah, but, you know, it is hard to recognize people. So I have one question from Matt, who wasn't able to make it, so he sent us a question ahead of time. Do you watch previous fights to get ready for a match? Any specific time this was useful for pulling off a victory? So I think we talked a little bit that we watch everything we could find. Like before we watched Duck, we watched all the videos on how to make a duck. They were not as helpful as we hoped. There was no like big secret there revealed or anything. But can you think of a specific time where that was, a game changer to have watched the episode ahead of time?
Well, I think like watching people's driving style, against a specific type of robot. We kind of talked about that a little bit, but seeing, now with like the different types of attachments and stuff people have, are they going to run like Whiplash now is, not even running his overhead saw or, vertical spinner. He's like all lifter. So that's definitely interesting. Last year he had the ability to swap it out, but just things like that where people make conscious decisions against certain types of robots that I think is important to try to do a little bit of research on and not be surprised when you line up and they have, 4 foot long forks and you're like, well, they use those pretty much for everybody. So that's going to happen.
So Dan says he did get to meet us. So that's awesome. All right. So this will be the last question from Glitter Bomb. Since, these are always so much fun. I always plan for a half hour and then we end up going like an hour, super easy. Glitter Bomb says, I miss Shaman. Will it ever come back? I saw a sign in the audience this year for Shaman, it's just so cool and so crazy. I think it's because Shaman was the first mini bot, because back in 2015, there just weren't a lot of mini bots and it was so, like, it did so much for its size. It's kind of, has its own following. Like Shaman gets its own fan mail, probably more than Witch Doctor does. Right now, I can't see us bringing it back, and definitely not in the same form that it was. Shaman weighed about 30 pounds, which is a big weight penalty to take. The robots hit a lot harder now than they did in 2015, so we definitely need that.
We need that, and Shaman would definitely not last getting hit by anybody. Like, I killed him by accident, but he would die so much faster now.
Lisa and Jude say they miss Shaman. I know, I miss him too. We actually raffled off gave away actually Shaman's top plate from season 2 to lucky supporter. So somebody here has it. We did do a test fight with
not a test fight. Test drive.
A test fight. Yeah, we did a test drive with Hypershock. If you watch our weapon test video on YouTube, there's like a little bit there. It's just driving donuts and stuff in the parking lot, but it's fun. All right, so I think this is a good stopping point for this live stream. A couple of things before we sign off. I'm sure you already know by now, but we have most of the frame from this fight up on eBay because Endgame retired pretty much the entire robot, which is super impressive. Unfortunate for us because this was only the second fight we had on that frame. So obviously we didn't get a lot of use out of it, but the previous champ hits really hard. But these are definitely some of the coolest parts that we'll have for sale all season. So that ends tomorrow. I think some of you might have already bid. I think I saw some familiar names on there. Also, we just posted a in-depth recap of our endgame fight that shows a lot more damage pictures and action photos than we showed here. It's about 5 minutes long. So if you want to take a look at all the damage from that fight in detail, go ahead and check out that video. And like I said at the beginning, if you're watching a recorded version of this video and you want to become a supporter and join us for the next one, take a look at the description. You'll be getting a free poker chip and autograph card, as well as making all our educational content possible. So please consider joining so you can interact with us in the next one. Oh, Keith says he has a wheel from last year. That's right. I think we sent you a photo too. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you so much for cheering us on all season. I honestly look forward to these chats. It's really, really fun. And I can't wait for you guys to see your next fight. Bye.
Bye.